So you are joining as a part of a broader seminar series called Let's Eat, or Let's Educate for Agroecological Transformations. And so today we're going to be offered a case study and a presentation of ECOSUR's master's program. A month ago, we had a case study of the University of Vermont's graduate certificate in agroecology. This is a part of this larger initiative that's organized by this wonderful group of people, where we're trying to bring folks together who are trying to think about how to advance a transformative agroecology in a higher ed setting. And we're at this point narrowing in and focusing in on case studies to learn from experiences of groups that have had kind of a history of building these programs. And we're going to build out further case studies and further topics in future iterations. To start this session, I'm going to hand it over to Ernesto Mendez, who's going to introduce this case study and the idea of agroecological transformations in education. So over to you, Ernesto.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos días a todos y todas. Thank you for being here today with us. It is my pleasure to introduce the group coming from El Colegio de la Frontera Sur in San Cristóbal de las Casas, Chiapas, who will be sharing with us one example that I consider really being in-depth in the transformative process as brought to education and pedagogy. They are really an example for a lot of us in other academic institutions to follow and to get inspiration for, because they are opening up the gates of the academy to include people from social movements and from rural communities, doing it in a very intentional way. And I am just really happy to be collaborating with them for a while now, and to invite them to start sharing with us all their experience. Once again, thank you for coming. And I'll pass it on to Helda, I believe, is going to start.
Buenos días. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Limbania Vasquez, who is our magnificent master coordinator, and she's going to share with us our goals and what we have been, our success, and also our pain, the things that we don't know how to do. And we hope that with this seminar today, we could all think together on how to improve our programs. And first, I wanted to introduce a little bit on who we are. We are very fortunate to have an interdisciplinary team. It's a multi-generational and multiracial. And here we are all and most of us are here today. Olga Domene from Venezuela, Mateo Mieriteran, who is now in Finland, but he is Mexican, from the young generation of Masificadores, Araceli Calderón, too, here in San Cristóbal de las Casas, Tabaré Duché, and Valeria Garcia, Bruce Ferguson, Limbania Vasquez, and unfortunately today, Peter Rosette cannot be with us today because he's in Thailand in a different schedule. So this Masificación group was formed 10 years ago because we were working on agroecology for many years and asking ourselves why, if agroecology is so great, why not so many people are adopting it? And the worst is that why so many people that used to practice agroecology are changing and starting to use pesticides. So that's why we have the fortune to form this magnificent group. And one of the goals that we had is to train people on how to scale out agroecology. And with that intention is that we opened this master program, and we graduate the first generation just a month ago. So welcome, Limbania. Thank you for being such a wonderful coordinator of our program. And and for accepting to share our program with all of us.
Buenos días a todas, a todes. Me voy a permitir compartir una
Good morning to all. To share a slideshow. Thank you, Helda, the group on massifying agroecology, and for this whole group in allowing us to have a conversation about the challenges and those who are committed to transformation
que no solo
and who have a pedagogical commitment to transformative processes in relationship with land and whose impact is expressed through the widening of collective impacts, nuclei, groups that continue to allow us to bring agroecology to more territories. And this presentation is a collaborative effort. We would like to share with you a bit about the experience of our masters in agroecology with some of the people who have just graduated and who we are very proud of. So first off, our program is a space of creation, recreation of thought, and linking agroecological kinds of knowledge, allowing for creativity and experimentation based on the dialogue of knowledge. This means that as a proposal, we try to allow knowledge and practice, but not just knowledge that's been systematized by science, but also knowledge that circulates as practices, that moves through our daily lives, can be for the benefit of understanding agroecological processes, but also
La propuesta
the
intenta
reconstruction of these same kinds of knowledge. We also think about learning and teaching processes. That is to say, we distance ourselves from a banking model of education. We distance ourselves from the conventional concept of professionalizing education. So that all who join this program can have a clear idea that the training that they receive is not only for their personal or professional growth, which is a good thing in of itself, but also that this learning belongs to the groups and the processes in which these people collaborate. The objective, their goal, the objective is the training of professionals with the knowledge, capacity, and attitudes that are necessary to accompany and generate collective processes to amplify the scope of agroecology and food sovereignty in its geographical, sociocultural, pedagogical, political dimensions. Our pedagogical proposal is constructivist, transformative, critical, and living. It doesn't only give tools to students, but goes beyond tools, enough to give them everything that they need to exist in a complex camp of subjectivities. So what we're trying to do is contribute to community work and community change so that these students can improve their communication abilities, their possibilities for popular education and community organizing, bringing critical theory into their daily practice that can help them facilitate agroecological processes. Then we have a profile of entrants. These are professionals with a bachelor's degree in any kind of knowledge that can be complementary to agroecological knowledge. But what's also important is that this person can prove that they are working directly with a community, with a collective process, with an organizational process or a group. This can be a civil organization, a peasant movement, a educational community, or a collective. And what do we hope for? That we hope that this person, after graduating, is able to contribute to organizing, facilitating, and supporting organizational processes for the territorialization of agroecology. We propose a study plan in which the center of everything is the experience of learning and teaching, not as a process of I teach you so that you know, but rather so that the experience puts us in the position to be able to learn together. So that these are sociocultural processes, research, daily experience, multiple ways of knowing to allow for learning in common. We also want all of the courses and seminars to have a holistic vision, including all of the themes of agroecology, all of the dimensions. This is a quick look at what our semesters look like. In the first year, we have 3 courses per semester, 3 courses per trimester. We want these courses to be sufficiently integrated, comprehensive, and focused on practice, but also dialogue-based and connected with experiences of life and in agroecology. And in that first year, we are also preparing for the final project, which I'll tell you about later, so that the 5th and 6th trimester people are working in their territories, so that the 7th trimester people are systematizing that experience with their groups. And the final trimesters are to close together a process, an educational process. This is crucial to ground their experiences so that the writing is a writing that's been built through dialogue, that's been shared not only with the groups with which these students work, but also with the faculty, because we don't want people to have worked alone to create their final project, but rather that this be something that comes out of a community of learning. We don't end as isolated subjects trying to solve problems on our own, but rather permanently accompanied groups, so that when in our peers and in our groups and in our collectives, we're talking about the ideas that we're working with. Now, the graduation project, the final project, consists of an innovative proposal that contributes to massifying agroecology in their organizations, schools, communities, or collectives.
Una sistematización o un documento que refleja los resultados de la
investigación, which
investigación
is a systematization or a document which shows the results of a participatory action, research, and collaboration with an organization or community, or it can be a product that's outward looking, a communications product. These can be the knowledge that's been produced in the research process being shared in a format that's useful for the community or the organization. going from a didactic game, a board game, calendars, farming calendars,
fichas,
short brochures, podcasts,
se están compartiendo
many different options. And these are our students sharing some of the some of what came out of their research projects. So that is to say that the community-focused communications products are also validated, just as the thesis is, because they are connected to the learning process just as much.
a 2 a 11 estudiantes provenientes de distintas partes del país.
So we had 11 students coming from different parts of Mexico and Latin America that represented the diversity of educational experiences and peasant organizations. This is the International March of Women, the Rural Workers Association, the
En fin,
IALAs, the
digamos,
Latin American Institutes of
teníamos
Agroecology.
a 11 personas, pero también teníamos
There were 11 people, but we also
más presentes, sino a
were not
11
just with 11 people,
procesos,
but
de
rather with 11
transformación,
processes of
procesos
transformation,
procesos de búsqueda, de
processes
transformación de las realidades,
of
bien sea en el
searching
campo
for ways
educativo,
to
bien sea en el
transform
campo,
the countryside
práctico, técnico.
through
Teníamos
practical and technical
representación, como
means.
dice, en el campo de la economía solidaria. Teníamos
Also,
representación
within the solidarity economy, there were many representatives of the solidarity economy among these 11 people.
Nuestro punto de partida en este programa que busca
Our
ser
starting
transformador
point
es la
in this
construcción de una
process was the
comunidad.
construction of
Y
a
esta
learning
parte
community.
por sentar las bases del
This
tejido
part
socioeducativo
attempting to
a
set the
través de la
basis
construcción de los
for a
sentidos de ser comunidad.
socio-educational
Una comunidad que
tissue,
se acompaña, que se sostiene,
a community
que
that
se interpela,
accompanies
que
one another,
discute,
that discusses
y que
things
pone en el
deeply,
centro la
and that
experiencia
puts into
colectiva
the
por
center
parte
the
de la
collective
experiencia
experience
personal para que
over the
el
personal
trabajo y el
experience
acompañamiento durante los 2 años del programa
for
sea
the
un
work and
trabajo que
accompaniment of the 2
permita
years that would allow for people to
mirar la
to
potencialidad que
to
tienen
see
aprender juntos y
the
juntas.
potential their potential of learning together.
Eso es de manera muy general lo que hemos logrado. Hay muchísimas cosas
That's
para
in general
contarles,
terms what we've been able to
por
accomplish.
supuesto que la emoción
There's a
de
lot
entrar
more
y
that we
haber
could
vivido
tell you
ya la
about.
primera generación,
Of course, it's
pues
been very exciting to live through the
podríamos
first
contarles muchísimas anécdotas de
graduating
los
class of
libros
this,
del
and I could tell
camino,
you many different
pero
stories about it.
quisiéramos centrar nuestra
But
atención en
I
los
would like us
avances
to
y
center
desafíos
our
que
attention
tenemos
on
nosotros
the advances that we've been able to
en el
have, but also
proceso
the
de
challenges
buscar una educación transformadora
in our search for a
más en el ámbito
transformative
del posgrado.
education within
Lo
the world
primero
of
es que
post-graduation,
nos dimos
post
cuenta que para
uh,
poder
graduate studies.
generar un proceso distinto, alterno de educación,
So to begin with,
reflexionar nuestra
thinking about how to create an
Y nos dimos a la
alternative
tarea de
pedagogical
revisar
process,
nuestra
we needed to
práctica
reflect
docente y nos dijimos al principio
around
de
our
este
teaching.
programa que valdría
And
la
we
pena
started to say to one
intentar
another
evitar
that
la ideologización de los procesos
it's important
agroecológicos,
to
volver a la
avoid
Universidad de
the
Ecología docente,
ideologization of the
formarnos
agroecological
permanentemente como
processes,
docentes,
to form
permitirnos
ourselves
que las prácticas
permanently
se
as
puedan ver
professors,
identificados,
to develop the diversity
aparecer
and ecology of
completos
ways of
y no
knowing,
como cachos de cerebros solamente entrando a la aula o
to
a las
try to be
cocinas en
complete
la
rather
vida.
than seeming
Estamos
like a,
completas con
a,
nuestras
a
luces,
pair
con
of
nuestro
brains
centro,
that just
con
walk
nuestros
into a
ruidos, pero
classroom and then
también con
walk away,
historias
to be able to carry
relevantes,
our light and our
profundas,
shade
muy
with us,
reveladoras que hacen que los
who
procesos
have
sean más
uh,
amplios, más complejos, pero también
life
más
trajectories that bring
Nos
complexity
dijimos
into these
que
spaces
también
but
tenemos
also
que
enrich them.
problematizar el pensamiento
We
muy,
talked
muy
about the
desde
need
las
to be able to
absolutas,
problematize
promover una pedagogía del
the only
presente,
one way of
una
thinking
pedagogía
and
de los cuidados,
the
trabajar las epistemologías
homogenization
diversas,
of
superar la
narrative,
disyuntiva entre pluralismo
to be able
interindividuo o
to
colectivo, porque
go beyond
ya ahorita más
the
adelante
challenge
traemos
between plural and
eso
singular,
como pregunta,
individual and collective,
buscar
and we'll talk about that a little bit more.
uno de los desafíos en
One
la
of the
educación
challenges
transformadora, dado su
in
carácter profundamente
transformative education
vivencial, experiencial,
is to
y
base
donde pone en
things
juego
profoundly on
todo,
living
donde las
experience,
emociones son
in which
importantes, donde
Emotions are important. Stories are important. The balance between theory and practice. That there's not just one kind of transformative pedagogy. There's many kinds. And to look for a rebellious and transformative way of learning together. We also realized that there was a lot to recover and understand those practices that can limit or strengthen a meaningful learning. So what is a meaningful learning? Here we say the one that becomes our flesh, the one that builds senses, the ones that opens up a world of work for us in order to see reality in a different way and see the coordinates that build a different reality. So a learning that has meaning in our body is a learning that will stay with us to be able to move camps of meaning and of knowledge. So some of those that we identified in that moment that could limit this meaningful learning is supposing that the other person doesn't know, or supposing and that the other, in this case the student, needs to be filled by new content. These assumptions don't allow us to be transformative because we are then supposing that these people have an emptiness that we can fill with our program, that we can fill with our pedagogy. We have to pay attention to this. To strengthen a meaningful learning, we can pay attention to the construction and quality of the linkages that are created during our mutual co-construction. This means we have to avoid a vertical relationship between professors and students and create a horizontal relationship between professors, students, territories, life experiences, trajectories, and create a set of links. Paying attention to those links is fundamental to be able to continue on the road of a meaningful learning. What else strengthens a meaningful learning? There's a responsibility with teachers, but that responsibility is also collective. The responsibility of the learning community. How do we build learning? How do we do it mutually? Another key element is to learn to manage ourselves collectively, to create co-responsibility and reciprocity as a permanent practice. It's very common to see ourselves in the role of a teacher or the role of a student. It's not always like this, but we often put ourselves in this role and build out of that role only. And by putting ourselves in this role, we're unable to see the reciprocity and co-responsibility that we could be doing, that would allow us to put from ourselves, out of ourselves, everything that we need to so that this learning can continue to germinate and the learning and the fruits come out for collectivity. So we don't deny ourselves. We put all of ourselves at the service of this collective process so that we can learn together. And when we put all these things at the service of this collective learning, not just what we have, but also our doubts, our fears, the difficulties that we have, and we put these at the surface of the community, there's a camp of possibility that opens to be able to see what we could in towards realizing, taking a leap forward, displacing, and what we had seen as a difficulty becomes an opportunity. This here is a list of different ideas that we've been able to put together as teachers. Another key challenge is the dialogue among sociocultural processes, research, and practice. This process of the master's program intentionally shares with knowledgeable people, with local and non-academic knowledge, farmers, cooks, medicine women, people who work with other kinds of knowledge, people who are part of the organizations, people who don't have an academic degree, but whose experiences are key to understanding these different worlds of life and ways of life, and understanding the multiplicity of forms of knowledge within agroecological processes form different ways of understanding life. These knowledgeable people are vital for us within our program. But this also implies a challenge, because to create a dialogue, when we bring people from different parts of Latin America to be able to meet one another with their differences, cultural differences, ideological differences, ways of seeing the world, generating a dialogue is a challenge. Then to be able to put this together with knowledge holders who are non-academic generates another challenge, because to be able to create bridges for real dialogue, for fertile understandings, and additionally to make these available to dialogues among other kinds of practice with more communities is another challenge. Dialogue, in order to be fertile, we say, has to be clear about the capacity of establishing bridges, so this can be possible, so that it doesn't become just discourse. We also have spaces for community interaction and dialogue. The students go for a month with an organization that's not their organization, and discovering that difference in their ways of organizing, their ways of management, their ways of living life, their ways of feeding themselves generates an impact in the person who spends that time with that other way of life. This is another challenge that we have, because to learn, and learning here is with an H, which means picking up as well as learning. So this is a challenge that we're still working on, is how to create these links and these dialogues for a more fertile learning. So we bring to you some of our problematic knots. These are questions that we have in our ink blot, questions that people have raised to us and that we haven't found answers for, but also we are sure that we don't need answers right away. The answers will come through the process. The answers will also come through the dialogue with others, such as you all, who are also carrying out alternative educational processes. And there may be questions that we all share, and that in some cases you have found some answers to, that can help us discover as a camp of possibilities, a field of possibilities in our graduate program. Our first set of questions is, what is it that we are calling transformative education? When do we call something a transformative practice? This educational approach favors the personal subjective realization or also the collective realization. For a proposal of agroecological territorialization, is it necessary for there to be individual processes, or is it better for everything to be put into the construction of a collective subject? How do we move from exercises of practical and curricular development in a transdisciplinary approach? How do we leave behind, or what holes do we find in what's been an entire transdisciplinary exercise in creating this program? And what role do knowledge holders have in this program? How do we promote a community of learning with co-responsibility and not with condescendence? These are some of the problematic knots that we've come across, along with some of the other things that I've mentioned, and that we would be very grateful to have with all of you, a dialogue with all of you, to help us if these questions that we've made for ourselves based on our experience, and we know that many of the processes that are here also dedicate themselves to curricular development, to study plans, to understanding other ways of teaching and learning. So it would be very enriching if you could help us to dialogue these questions. And to end here, I just wanted to say thanks to the organizations that we're collaborating with here. Grow Ahead, the Agroecology Fund, and the Kellogg Foundation, because each one of these great organizations has helped us make this a dream reality. I also want to say thank you to the Scientific Society of Agroecology in Latin America, SOCLA, because of its alliance with us, which has allowed us to think about other ways of creating agroecological education. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Limbania.
Thank you.
So much, Limbania. So now we are ready to organize the breakout groups. We have 4 different topics that we would like to discuss with you. And unfortunately, because we don't have so much time, we decided to form 4 groups, and 2 in English and 2 in Spanish. So our friends in Vermont are gonna help us to divide us in those teams. So the first group will be discussing the role of knowledgeable people in the master program. That will be a team in English, led by Niels and Helda. And the second group will discuss the challenge of a transformative education. Esa va a ser en español. Los retos de una educación transformadora, with that will be led by Limbania and Tabaré. And the third team will be discussing transdisciplinarity as a guiding principle for the master program in English, and it would be led by Mateo and Bruce. And the fourth team in Spanish va a ser Es la escritura el único camino para la MAE, and va a ser liderada por Araceli y por Valeria. I don't know if I'm confusing enough. Should I repeat it?
So Helda, I'm going to paste the PDF or the document that you sent to me. Is that okay to send around to everyone?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put that in so everybody can know the questions for each of the 4 groups, right? And then I'm gonna open up the rooms, and because not everybody's put their language before, I'm gonna open up each of the rooms and people will self-select into them. So they'll open up and you choose which of the 4 rooms you want to go to based on your topic of interest and your language that you prefer to speak in. And I'm gonna open those now.
Thank you. And the idea is to have a discussion for about 20 minutes. And we will ask then in each group to take notes. And then at the plenary that Ernesto will help with the discussion. We will try to put everything together. I don't know if you have questions about how to get organized.
So thank you so much to all of you for participating in your groups. We have about 20 minutes, and what I would like to propose is it a note taker from each group share with the plenary a little bit about the discussion that took place, because all of these were very interesting. Maybe the representatives of ECOSUR, who were the note takers, would be the easiest way to share back. So we have about 5 minutes for each group to share back. And what I would propose is that the note taker give a really short, start by telling us what their topic was, and then a really short summary. And then we could maybe have enough time for one question, and then we'll go back, we'll go to the next group and continue. Does that sound okay? So let's begin with group number 1. That was my group. So let's start with group 4.
Araceli y Valeria.
Ok, Araceli y Valeria nos cuentan un poquito de cómo les fue.
Bueno, pensamos que íbamos a ser las últimas.
We thought we were going to be the last. We thought we were going to be the last ones. We got to shake it up. We have to shake it up. Please go ahead. I'll be the timekeeper here. So we'll be brief. Our group was small. We had Amaya, Emily, Carlos, Diego, Valeria, and myself. And we talked about writing as a path. And we asked ourselves whether that's the only path forward for humanity, to formulate the knowledge that's generated. And very interesting things came out of the conversation. And we talked about how this comes out of the homogenization of knowledge with a strong effect on cultural diversity and ways of showing, particularly, cultural diversity in general. We talked in general about the possibility, this issue of academic writing based in formulas and short phrases without the chance to really explain things or share emotions as we like to in Latin America. And we talked about the possibility of other more graphical, more visual ways, including drawings, poetry. But also, we talked a very important topic which Carlos brought up, which was how the knowledge arrives to these spaces to put forward a debate among different narratives and how to learn and share narratives. In Bolivia, We talk about the relationship between society and nature as being political. So those were the main things that we got out of the conversation. I would come back to the idea of agroecology as a way to find oral knowledge, ancestral knowledge, and these transitions. So having academic writing as the only way of communication prevents other voices, subalternate voices, as has been happening for a very long time, because in addition to being homogenous, it's also patriarchal, racist, colonial. So making these transitions through agroecology. So it's a success. It enriched us, and we've got questions to keep thinking about. And we will pass the word to the other group. Wait a minute, you guys still have another
Excelente,
minute.
excelente.
So if anybody,
Con el tiempo, pero si alguien
that's
de la
excellent.
audiencia
Good job with the time. If anybody wants to ask them a question, we got time.
No quieren oír los otros. Es que lo hicieron tan bien que
You just did it so well that there's no questions. Wait. I got a question. So wait a minute. How are we going to interrupt in those scientific tasks? How are we going to break that separation? What's the methodology? How will we do it?
respuesta rápida.
Quick answer.
Pues todos tenemos que inventar formas.
We've all got to create our own ways. We've all got to invent a way to break it. This is what we understand. These are really important questions. These will push us to find new ways. We don't have the answers, but we all have the commitment to be creative and find new ways to break those rigid schemes. No more time. But that was a nice, humble ending. Thank you. So now we'll go to the Bruce and Mateo group.
I will do it in English because the group was in English. So we were with Molly, Katie, Andrew, Marielle, Georgina, Anthony, Martha, Ernesto, and two other people that we couldn't identify. And the topic was about how to integrate or how to face transdiscipline. If one should start directly with transdiscipline, or one should start with disciplines to move forward to have a transdisciplinary education. So the short answer was there's only one is to start with transdiscipline. That's how the Molly started, and we all more or less agree. So we have to start with transdisciplinary approaches, finding specific situations that have to be understood transdisciplinary, transdisciplinary focus or approach, and the thing that worked the most for Georgina has been the interaction in the communities. And Molly also mentioned bringing the presence and talking with the people that has had experience outside academia. So those are two very clear ways of doing the transdisciplinary work already in the education field. And that more or less summarizes. There's also a mention of, well, if agroecology is holistic and integrates different views, then we need to start from that perspective. We need to start from the holistic and then move forward. Of course, there's still the worry about how to deal with the questions that are mainly disciplinary. But the answer was to start first with a more integrated approach, and then find what are the needs, specific needs in the disciplinary approaches. There was also a question of how to deal with uncertainty and chaos. And then the idea of before going to the field, practicing skills in the classroom, so that such as deep listening, so that when you go to the field, then you have a certain skills to actually do transdisciplinary work. I did shorten it quite a lot, so if anyone else, Bruce, or any of the other people want to add something, please.
No, yo creo que está perfecto, Mateo. Muchas gracias. Y así tal vez más bien una o dos
Nope,
preguntitas.
I think it's perfect, Mateo. Thanks so much. Maybe one or two questions from those who weren't in the group. Anyone would like to start?
Tal vez directo hablan, porque a veces no veo.
Go ahead and say something, because I won't be able to see you. Go ahead and start in if you have a question for Mateo.
Yo tengo una.
I have one.
Mira que nadie está. Para mí,
So for me, one of the most difficult parts of transdisciplinary work is that interaction with non-academic knowledge. I'm not sure if you talked about that. We see this, we see transdiscipline work as academic knowledge looking to interact with non-academic knowledge, but relating a little bit to what we talked about earlier, how do we bring that to the academic spaces? How do we start to raise consciousness among students, train students to work with non-academic knowledge?
From what we mentioned, one thing which is an indirect answer is to pay the people that are not academics to value what they do. And this, I think, if students are also aware of the fact that these people are part of their learning community and that they're valued in terms of salaries and proper compensation of their work, I think that's just it might be symbolic, but I think it creates a different mental approach to how we see people that are not academics. But I think that's the topic of table of the group one, no? And yeah, the idea is that you need to go to the field and visit the communities and interact with the people. That's what we said, was mentioned very clear, no?
Muchas gracias, Mateo, y al grupo 3. Ahora vamos
Thank
con
you
el grupo.
so much, Mateo, and group 3. Now we'll go to group 2, the challenges of a transformative education. I'll speak for our group. In our group, we had the joy of having a note taker that wasn't from ECOSUR, but we were Yannitzin, Ana, Lina, Fernanda, Brian, Jose Luis, Olga, Franz, Limbania, and myself, Tabaré. Go ahead, please. Hi, good morning to all. I wrote down everything we talked about. We reflect about 3 questions. When is an educational practice a transformative educational practice? People talked about when it has a liberatory approach and looks to make a change. When its intention is to change the way people think, feel as individuals and as collectives, supporting diversity. We also talked about when there are dynamic processes of consciousness with the collective dynamic, and that when they work against hegemonic educational practices, when reflection happens in community, when people are able to rethink current practices and they're put upon the table to discuss, and when it goes beyond people saying whether something is good or bad, but they actually force us to think. The next question was, what do we call transformative within the educational process? When the colonial education has overlooked ancestral knowledge, when we try to recover those kinds of knowledge, and when non-academic thinkers and knowledge holders feel valued. Because it's not just the knowledge existing on its own, but the knowledge forms part of a body, right? Of a person. Finding other alternatives, because often we're accustomed to look for the big vision, to look for a big success, but to recognize that these small things make big differences over time. We also talked about that what they've taught us hasn't been good for nature, hasn't been good for living beings. We need to have the environmental ethics present in all disciplines. All disciplines have to be thinking about environmental ethics, medicine, accountants, everything should have a environmental ethic. And the next one is, who makes the transformation? The current system produces systematically at the global level, but we have other ways of thinking, doing, and being. Because if we don't, we won't change anything. While processes of change are not easy, because sometimes they run up against political aspects and economic structures, but by focusing on the personal, the intimate, and as consumers, we can be part of this transformation. And sometimes there's some part of it that sounds very romantic. It also is based on inspiration and based on our commitment to change. That's what we were able to communicate in our group and reflect. Thanks. We have time for one question. Go ahead and ask your question. No one? Okay, so we're going to continue and we can come back if we still have time. Let's go with group number 1, please. That was my group. Hilda. Thank you. Our group was in English, but we all spoke Spanish, so we moved to Spanish and I'll speak in Spanish. Our group was made up, it was a big group. Everyone was from the Vermont group. Gabriela Buccini, Katie Horner, Nils McCune, Carlos Andres Gallegos, Ernesto Mendez. From ECOSUR, I was there. The context which I brought up was that in the Masters in Agroecology, it hurts us that we don't know how to bring knowledge holders, cooks, peasant farmers, leaders of organizations, social communicators to our academic team. We're making an effort. We're trying to do it. Sometimes we've had some success, other times we've had less. Finally, we've been able to get ECOSUR to accept these people giving classes, because previously only people with a master's degree could give a class, but now we've been able to justify this. We've also been able to get some funds from Kellogg Foundation to be able to pay people for their work giving classes, but it's been difficult. It's been difficult to pay these people as professionals. Also, it's been painful to see that some of the students, despite being people who are deeply committed to agroecology and who want to work with peasant farmers, don't pay as much attention as when a woman peasant farmer speaks as when the male doctor in agroecology speaks. So we wanted to talk about this with you, and there was many good ideas that came up, and I'll share some of those ideas. The colleagues from Vermont said that it's very easy to talk about the dialogue of knowledge and horizontality, but doing it is much more difficult. What they've done is take people to the context of peasant farmers. And in that case, the peasant farmers have the power there in their context. They're surrounded by what they know a lot about. And in those spaces, they've been respected. When they take the peasant person to the classroom, they're in a context outside of their space where there's a vocabulary that they're not accustomed to using, and they're not able to necessarily use their advantages. So that can make it difficult for them. Gabriela told us that in West Africa, they've worked with pairs of peasant farmers. One person with more experience working with the academic language and another person working with less, to start to translate these languages, these academic languages that we have. But that was also debated. Katie and Carlos Andres said that we academics, with our westernized mentality, should relearn, should learn these ways of speaking and sharing, and that this is what we should start to do at the beginning of our programs. Nils mentioned that we should be sharing non-academic documents with our students so that they're able to develop their hearing and understand how people express themselves outside of academics. He shared a book by Falsborda, where the name of the book sounds very academic. It would seem to be an academic book, but when you open it up, the whole book is just dialogues among peasant people. And so first, people don't understand what they're talking about, but as people read it, you start to develop an understanding of what people are saying, and that could be a strategy for helping students to understand. We also talked about the difficulty of paying people and recognizing people's labor and having to find external grants, as we've had to do in ECOSUR. And there, yeah, it was a good, interesting dialogue to see. Sometimes we're forcing things. We're trying to do things in spaces that are unusual, and we should make a great effort to see that there's many ways of learning, and that our students in these transformative programs should develop these abilities to be attentive, to discuss ideas, but not only to discuss, as I would say, but I would say to learn also, to figure out how to learn. And we're used to learning in classrooms, and that maybe this way we could learn better. And one of the things that's happened is that in ECOSUR, these people who maybe on their farm would do a good job of explaining what they're doing, they actually love to be invited to our classrooms. And sometimes they do it for free. And they feel very pleased to be considered university professors. So that's something that we should take into account as well. That's what we talked about. And thank you so much for the Vermont team for that discussion that we had. Thank you so much. We have our heart filled, not only from our friends from ECOSUR, because what we've talked about is so relevant to a transformative agroecology. And thank you so much to all. And I'll share it with Colin so that he can close.
Thank you, Ernesto. Echoing your gratitude for the ECOSUR team, just add gratitude to the interpretation team. And also note that I'm just going to share my screen so you can see. Next, can you see my screen? Yes, great. The next session, we're going to have a month, and then we're going to come back on June. Well, it's not even a month. It's very soon, actually. Oh, it is a month. Yep. June 6th, Cordoba, we're going to hear about their master's and PhD program. We're going to take a break for 2 months, and then we're going to come back in September session to be decided, and then we're going to program for the rest of the year. We're again focusing in on case studies of programs at the moment, but we're talking about maybe picking up different topics and kind of going deeper around a particular pedagogy or a particular approach or an issue. Like, how do you take, for example, a program that's really focused on the technical aspects of agroecology and build in the social and the political, because this is something we've been hearing as a challenge when agroecology, a transformative agroecology, is kind of being picked up as a thing to do, but people are trying to figure out how to move from where they are to where it could be deepened. And so also just note that all the resources, so the recordings from the last session, and we also posted some syllabi for the courses in our program at the University of Vermont, are at this email or at this web address here. And we'll be posting the recordings from this session here, and any resources and materials that the ECOSUR team wants to share will also be up there. But again, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you again next time, hopefully. Bye.
Chao, chao.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Bye.
Gracias.
Gracias. Un abrazo.
Gracias, compañeros, compañeras. Hasta luego.
Gracias, queridos.